Yep, exactly. All right, we are live for the Blue Star Lunch Hour. I am Joey Ice. Let me make sure I can remember this. It's been a couple weeks. That John Oney, got it. We've been through a few weeks here, John. We've between our vacations, bosses' vacations, hurricanes rolling through Southeast Texas. We've had a few weeks here where it's been rough for us to get together, but we are now. The Cowboys report to training camp next week. Their first workout is the 27th or the 25th, excuse me. So a week from this Thursday is their first practice. That's not really necessarily much of a practice, but they'll be in Oxnard. There will be footballs moving around. There will be people running around in cleats on grass, and it will be amazing to behold. We're going to get into some individual players and stuff like that we're really hoping will stand out or that need to stand out in camp for the Cowboys to have a good 2024 season. But John, about a week out from camp, what's like the biggest storyline that you're watching that you're thinking through right now as we get ready for camp?
Well, I think if you're looking from like a general fan perspective, everybody's eyes are going to be on, is CeeDee Lamb going to report? Dak Prescott's contract situation. He obviously is going to report, it seems like, even though he hasn't gotten the contract extension that he's looking for. And then Micah Parsons, I think the 3 contract kind of situations is kind of the big cloud hanging over the franchise right now. And until that is kind of figured out, I think that's going to be the main talking point. That's going to be the main thing that McCarthy is going to have to respond to every press conference, and probably 3 days in, he's going to get really irritated.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Jerry Jones is probably going to have like a glory hole comment on the big State of the Union address that he does at the beginning of every camp. So that's the biggest thing, I think, from a general Cowboys fan, what they're going to be focused on. For me personally, I'm just really excited to see what these new faces on the team are going to look like. And like I've been saying all offseason, I'm incredibly excited to see the wrinkles and the real manifestation of Mike Zimmer's scheme with the Cowboys defensive personnel. I think the kind of whispers that you hear coming from players, coming from coaches, executives, everybody seems like they're going to be doing some pretty interesting things. So I'm excited to see how that plays out on the football field. Where is Micah Parsons going to line up? What kind of techniques are the defensive tackles going to play? How is Mazi's stance going to look? How is Mazi's just body type?
Right.
Those type of things. Those are all the things that I'm going to be keeping a close eye on. I know when I go to Oxnard, my first thing I'm going to go to is I'm going to go to those OLDL line drills, and I'm going to see how that's going. And that obviously anybody that follows me or has read my work note could probably have guessed that when I was going in, but I'm really excited. I think it's going to be a fun atmosphere. I think it's going to be a very competitive atmosphere as well. So I'm excited to see how it goes. And Oxnard's not super hot, so I can't wait to get down there.
There you go. Yeah, I think we could both use some of that Oxnard air right now. Yeah. I think you hit on a few of them, and a few of them we will learn some answers to, before the team ever sets foot on the field, right? Like we will get, the Jerry Jones, some sort of reference to some piece of nature and some revolving it around some, whether it's leaves or mosquitoes or, grasshoppers or whatever, there will be some reference to nature and some metaphor that nobody understands or doesn't make sense. And then we will also get those answers. We'll get some answers. The questions will be asked in that first press conference about the status of those contract extensions, especially if one of those guys on offense. I don't think there's any worry about Micah not showing up because of all the stuff, but especially if there's one of those guys who doesn't travel with, if Dak or CeeDee doesn't travel with the team, because all the reporters watch the guys get off the plane. There's the whole process of getting there. That is, especially with the fact that there's a lot of team reporters that work for the team and fly with the team. We will know by the time the plane takes off whether one of those guys was on the plane or not. And so if CeeDee Lamb isn't on the plane, that now becomes a huge storyline, right? If Dak Prescott's not on the plane, that becomes a huge storyline. But and then the Mazi Smith thing, we will probably know a lot about the weight situation and all that kind of stuff by what guys like No C and Nick Harris and stuff like that tell us about how he looks getting on and off the plane. Somebody will.
Here's the problem about that kind of thing. I think human beings in general, unless you're around, like you evaluate body types for a living, we are terrible at guessing how much someone weighs, what their body type is, if they put on or haven't put on muscle. I know we were just talking about him before, but Mike Israetel did a video on it. I think it was like it's old now, 2 or 3 years ago, where he talked about how they have studies about people who try to guess, body mass changes and how we're so wildly off for what we think. So that's one of those things that if they say he looks bigger, I'm not going to take that as gospel, even though I know they do incredible work. I just know that's not what they're not, historically, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, whatever. Typically in the past, like people that are good at guessing weight are like MMA fighters, wrestlers, guys
who have to make it. Yeah. Who have to make weight. Yeah.
Each for each event that they do. And not only are they making a weight, they're in a crowd of people, they're evaluating who's in my weight class. Is that guy in my weight class? Is that guy in my weight class? And that, after years and years of doing that, you get actually really good at guessing what somebody's weight is and stuff like that. And I just don't think that's kind of the strength of the reporters following the beat writers following the team.
Yeah, and I think a lot of my thought on that comes from the fact that I don't necessarily believe that Mazi's going to add a lot of lean mass in this situation for a lot of reasons, right? Like 6 months between the season and the start of training camp is not a lot of time to add a bunch of lean mass, even if you are healthy. Then you add on the fact that he had the upper body surgery and all that other kind of stuff, etc. He's not going to – I don't think we're talking about a lot of lean mass here that we're going to be adding, unless you're talking about, unless we're going to get into some conversations about some stuff that you and I talk about a little bit through other avenues, but we won't talk about that here on YouTube for research purposes only. We'll make sure to just make that statement. But yeah, unless you're talking about stuff like that, I don't think there's going to be a lot of lean mass. I think we're going to be talking about a little bit of a sloppy player. If he adds the weight back to get back to where he was, I don't think you're talking about like. And to be fair to him, he was not a sloppy looking player before he lost the weight, which kind of makes it scary that he lost that much weight because now granted he was 330 pounds or something like that. So there was non-lean body mass for him to lose, but I don't think we're talking about him adding back 25 or 30 pounds of, 10% of his body weight and lean muscle mass in one off season when he had a surgery and all that kind of stuff. So I think it'll be like, oh, Mazi looks a little bigger around the midsection than he did last year and stuff like that. And just to see if there was a decided effort from a nutritional standpoint to put that weight back on versus, hey, we're going to kind of take the weight gain slow because of the surgery and all that kind of stuff. And we know you'll play lighter than normal this year because of all that. And then we'll build you back up over the next couple of years. It's probably the approach to take if you're trying to build it up lean. But he may not do that. He may just add a bunch of sloppy weight and know he's going to lose a bunch of it throughout the course of the season and go that way.
Yeah, I believe wasn't there another Cowboys defender that said he was going to come in a little bit heavy into camp, knowing that he was going to slowly drop that throughout the season, and he would end up at his optimal playing weight. I forget who it was. It might have been Overshown who said
that.
Yeah,
there's been a lot of there's a lot of guys that talk about that year to year, and like a lot of retired players will come, we'll talk about that kind of stuff about how you hear all this stuff about guys coming into camp in the best shape of their life and they're leaner than ever and all that kind of stuff. And you get these guys who are 10, 12-year veterans who retire, and they're like, that's not necessarily the best idea to come to camp super lean because you're going to lose a ton of weight. And now, granted, they're lucky, like you said, they're not practicing in the heat, but I live outside of Houston. Like the Texans practice here in Houston, and a bunch of their practices are outside. Like if you're a wide receiver who lives at 12% or less body fat, and you roll into camp at 10 or 12% body fat, and you're practicing in 100-degree heat every day for 2 or 3 hours a day, like you're getting into some dangerous situations there. It's not necessarily the best, the best practice from a managing your body standpoint for what is essentially a 6-month season from the start of training camp to the end of the regular season. So we'll see. I think we'll get some insight that maybe Mazi's a little bigger around the midsection this year, and they will say. And the funny thing is, they will probably say he looks like he gained weight, whether he does or not, because that's almost the expectation is that he gained weight, and so they're going to be looking for the weight gain. But then you get into the stuff on the field, right? The where's Micah Parsons going to line up? Is Micah impacted early in camp? And this will be a detailed thing that there may only be a handful of guys that are there that would notice this kind of stuff. And you're probably one of them. And I don't know that you'll be there early enough in camp to be able to tell. Is Micah impacted in the first week or two of camp by not having the on-field install work in April and May? We had that whole conversation. We don't have to go back to that. But is there an impact of that in terms of what the differences are in the scheme? And to me, that's really the big storyline is, are they doing, and there are some writers that will pick up on this kind of stuff, do the drills that guys like the DBs and linebackers are doing from a coverage standpoint look significantly different enough to signify, hey, we're going to do more than this man coverage, cover 1, cover 3, with some cover 2 thrown in world that they've lived in for the last 2 years. I think we'll be able to tell by the drill work more than like, hey, let's line up and play 11 on 11 what they're doing, because a lot of the folks there won't necessarily be able to look at the scheme and go, oh yeah, they were playing palms and doing this instead of playing cover 2.
Yeah, and that's that stuff. But you got to have a really good knowledge of the intimacy of cornerback technique, because playing cover 1 and cover 3, the depths that you align at, the your posture, like the way that your feet are aligned, the way that where your eyes are, they're all completely different between each coverage, but they're subtle, the different, not everything. Like obviously most people can tell the difference between someone who's playing like cover 1 press and then like they're playing cover 2 cloud, they have that little cloud alignment, or they're lined up deep, and they're playing that traditional, cover 3 sidewinder type style. It's going to be interesting to see, because obviously I'm not going to be there until August 2nd. So I'll be there the second week of practice because I didn't want to get there before pads.
Yeah, you don't need that. There's not a whole lot to be gleaned in that first week from before pads come on.
Hopefully, we do have guys like, who I would think is probably one of the top 2 or 3 beat writers on the job, guys like Michael Guyton. That's something that he will pick up on. That's something that he would see. And I'm going to be very interested reading those guys that we have kind of developed over years of following the Cowboys beat, that we know kind of whose strengths lies with who. Like we know that David Moore is going to be telling us kind of what the executive branch is going to be thinking and feeling during those times. Tard Archer is really close with like the coaching staff, the scouting staff. He gets a lot of those nuggets. And then you got guys like Michael Guyton who are a little bit closer to the players, and they have a little bit more of a technique-minded eye for what they're seeing on the field. So that's going to be interesting. And guys like, John Machota, No C, these guys are Nick. They're all fantastic, and they all have their kind of strengths that you can kind of use all their reporting together to give you a really kind of, not the clearest picture, but as clear a picture as you can get without attending the practices yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll take a minute here just to express appreciation for we spend a lot of time throughout the year talking about how much attention the Cowboys get and how exhausting it gets that they get all this national coverage for stuff that no other team would get. No other team would have conversations about stuff the Cowboys talk about. But the side effect of that is that there is like a veritable army of full-time beat reporters that cover basically exclusively the Cowboys to give you the level of coverage that you're talking about. Like we just went through 4, 5, 6 folks, and we didn't even get to like Jane Slater and the other. There's tons of them
And there's even like guys like, our good friend Lennon McCool's going to be down there
Exactly.
for 5 days. He's an incredibly knowledgeable person. He may not be a beat writer, but he got that media credential, baby. He's
there you go. Exactly. And so like there are teams that like have one beat writer that you can trust and listen to. And the Cowboys have like this army of guys. Like, are there some beat writers that cover the Cowboys? They're like, yeah, no, maybe not. Yes, absolutely. We're not going to name any names. Most of them are all really good people. Whether they're great at their jobs or not is a different story. But that's a different conversation that I'm not going to name any names there. But we have this army of guys and girls that cover this team that do an incredible job doing it. And because of that, we get all this access and all this information. And I don't know if they'll do it this year, but we've had this team, they post their own online videos of their training camp practices. Like the access that me, as a guy who lives outside of Houston, Texas, and has never been to Oxnard, California to watch a training camp practice, I have probably seen more training camp reps of the Cowboys than a lot of guys who follow and cover a lot of teams that don't cover it on the beat live and in person, just because of, Don Machota and Dave Hellman and Brian Broaddus and, Michael Gelkin and Todd Archer and all these guys that we're talking about, and guys like you and Landon that go, and Yuma, who goes out there and a lot of times will set a camera up in the stands and just record the whole practice, right? Like these guys, there's so much coverage, and that's part of, that's the benefit side effect of the show that is Cowboys training camp, is like, if it weren't for the big opening ceremony and all this other kind of stuff that they want to have the fans there, they want it to be a show. If it weren't for that, we wouldn't get all this stuff. And so I'm thankful for it, even if it comes with a little bit of sideshow action for sure.
Yeah, no other team in the NFL gives as much access to the fans as the Dallas Cowboys do.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I mean,
you can argue whether that's a good or a bad thing for the team or what have you be, but for us fans' sake, it's a huge win.
Well, and that includes like walking fans through the draft room and showing them the draft board.
Oh, yeah.
And it winded up online 5 times in the last decade or something like that. Like it's that kind of stuff. There's a reason why Hard Knocks started with the Cowboys. Like all this access that fans now have to a lot of teams started with access that the Cowboys had the vision to see. Now, whether they have the same vision to run their football organization the same way is a different story. But
that's one of the things I respect most about Jerry Jones, to be honest. When the rest of we all have our litany of issues with Jerry Jones and the things that he does. But one of the things I love most is the NFL treats some of their information like they're hiding state secrets, like the nuclear launch codes. And Jerry Jones kind of admits, like, guys, this is entertainment. We're doing this first and foremost to entertain the fans. And that has been laid bare by the access that he gives fans and media on a weekly basis. I mean, go talk to other teams, beat writers and beat reporters. They don't get nearly the access. They don't get nearly the ability to tell fans what is going on.
Yeah, the rules about like there are like the Broncos, for example. Cecil Lamb covers the Broncos, does a lot of works for football guys. So you'll hear a lot of Broncos perspective from him. You'll hear about the restrictions that like they can't talk about what personnel is on the field together at Broncos training camp because the Broncos feel like it's going to give out some sort. There's all these rules in all these places about what the media can and can't share. And you've got, for the last 10 years, you've had John Machota and Tiny Jim. Yes, KJ, we miss Tiny Jim too. His Fox podcast is awesome, by the way. Listen to the NFL on Fox podcast. He's great. But you've got guys like that who will just stand by the sideline with their cell phone on the field with their media credential around their neck and just record play after play after play. And it just immediately goes up on Twitter. And it's just like, I can practically sit here in Houston and watch a training camp practice rep for rep for rep for rep for rep through my Twitter timeline. And there's no way that's the case. I know it's not the case for every other fan base. So it's pretty awesome it's pretty awesome to be a Cowboys fan during this time of year because of that. This is almost the funnest time of year for Cowboys fans because this is the most consistent flow of new information and things to talk about and see and do, and all the content really ramps up and the players are way more available during this time. It's a really cool time. I enjoy training camp maybe as much as I enjoy the season, just because the season becomes this repetitive grind of all the tape watching and the writing and the podcasting and all that kind of stuff. The training camp's like it's a little more, there's a little more breathing room and in and out, and there's some days off and stuff like that. So it's a fun time for sure. Although I think the players would probably disagree, it's probably their least favorite time of year because it probably is more of a grind for them even than the regular season might be.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think a lot of things you see, especially with the players who kind of have their secured spot on the roster, they're a lot more relaxed. They're not as, during the season, they get kind of protective of what they're saying. They might be jaded depending on what was reported on them or what have you. But at training camp, they're, for the most part, pretty lax, willing to talk, willing to, answer your questions, all these things. So it's a really exciting and fun time. I can't wait to get down there to see this team with my own eyes and, catch up with everybody. So it's going to be a great time and cannot wait.
Yeah. And so as we get back to the team and the on-field product and stuff like that, this is a really interesting year, it feels like. Now, we've talked a lot on this show, and everybody who covers the Cowboys has talked about it's the last year of Mike McCarthy's contract. It's the last year of Dak Prescott's contract. It's the 5th-year option on CeeDee Lamb's contract. No, this is the 4th year on CeeDee Lamb. No, it's the 5th-year option on CeeDee Lamb. It's the last year of Micah Parsons' rookie contract before his 5th-year option. Like, this is just made a big turnover transition on the offensive line. This is potentially, probably, I think a lot of people would say the last year we're going to see Zach Martin probably with the Cowboys. There's a chance it's the last year of Tank Lawrence. Like, massive turnover coming to this team between 2024 and 2025. So, you have the last ride conversation or whatever, but what it really is it's a season where they've kind of said, all right, this is this group's last chance together to do something really big and really awesome. And at the same time, they didn't give them a lot of additional help and resources to do it. Mike Zimmer's on a 1-year contract to be defensive coordinator. Like, this is not hey, this is the direction this team's going long term right now. I'm very interested to see, and I think this is going to be the first time that this team really has the opportunity to build some positive momentum and storyline and all that kind of stuff leading through into the season. Because the whole offseason's just been, one thing after another, after another, after another, that's just kind of felt like the team coming up short in a lot of areas the fans would want them to move in. And now we get to go out there and, especially if, you get a CeeDee Lamb contract announced at the opening press conference, or they do a press conference before the first practice, a separate one for CeeDee to do his, new contract, or a Dak extension or something like that. You get something like that, you get some positive momentum, and then you get on the field and these guys look really great together. And, the offense, Tyler Guyton's blocking Tank Lawrence and stuff like that. You start to build some momentum going into these situations. This is really the first time for that to happen. So on offense, who are some guys that you can think of who, if this guy has a good camp, and take Dak out of that conversation, Dak, whether Dak has a good camp or not, doesn't really matter. We've seen Dak have relatively poor training camps. Like, early in his career, he was not a good practice player. Like, it's well noted,
outperformed by Jamil Showers.
Yeah, exactly. Like, a practice squad safety was playing quarterback better than he did his rookie year. And then we got into the games and we got into the regular season, and he proved that didn't matter, right? And so with that being the case, and now he's a much better practice player, I think everybody kind of agrees. He's cleaned up a lot of the things that have caused those issues in the past. But Dak aside, because that doesn't really matter, he's going to be really good in the regular season no matter what. Who is it that, like, if this player has a standout training camp, or this couple of players have standout training camps, it's like a massive sign for you in a positive direction for the Cowboys?
I think the main one is easy. It's Tyler Guyton, the presumed starting left tackle. And I mean, out of everybody on the roster, just so happens to be, he may have the hardest job in training camp out of anybody else on the entire roster. Because if you look at he's going to be doing battle mostly with DeMarcus Lawrence, who's a technician, who's a vet, who, has the footwork, manipulative footwork. He has the hand technique to take advantage of inexperienced players. And then you have Micah Parsons, who's just like the 3 Deathly Hallows on your shirt. He's got the speed, he's got the power, he's got the technique, he's got everything that, it's going to be rough for him, especially against Micah Parsons, just because Micah Parsons' speed is going to put is going to ramp up how fast he's going to have to do anything. And that's when you start to see technical breakdowns a little bit. The one thing against DeMarcus Lawrence that helps him is DeMarcus Lawrence isn't the fastest or the quickest guy. So he can still get into his spot, and he's not going to be, he's not going to be, I don't know why words aren't coming to my head right now, but he's not going to be in a hurry. To get it. So the technical breakdowns, and while they still may happen, they're less likely to happen when you're not in a hurry in those situations, when you're not hurried in your technique. So I think that's going to be rough. But if he comes out and he has a solid, he's not going to get the better of Micah Parsons, but he's holding his own in situations, and he's maybe doing pretty good against DeMarcus Lawrence. He's not getting blown up in the 9-on-7s or the inside run drills. That's going to be very important to see. So if he comes out and has a really strong training camp, then that's going to really change the way that you judge and about how good this offensive line is going to be and how good it can be in next season. And that kind of really changes your thought process about how effective the offense can be as a whole.
Yeah, and just as a reminder and some context for folks, the last couple of times the Cowboys spent high draft capital on a young developmental, what we thought was a young developmental tackle, their first training camps were not these like massive success stories where it was like landslide of this guy's going to be a great player. Like Tyron Smith got worked by DeMarcus Ware in his first training camp.
To the point where people were worried that he was a bust.
Yes, like it was like, okay, J.J. Watt was taking a couple picks after. There were 5 or 6 offensive tackles taken in that draft early. And so it was like, okay, did we take the wrong guy here? Like we took the big upside play on the super young athletic kid from USC. Like, did we make the wrong play here? Like, is this rough? And then slowly and surely throughout camp, he started to win a few more reps and he started to win a few more reps. And then it got to the regular season and was a really good right tackle as a rookie starter. As a rookie, and then the next season flips to left tackle.
Draft class by far.
Yeah. Oh, and now you look back almost 15 years later, and it's like very clear he was one of the top. And that's a incredible draft class, like that 2011 class. Go back and look at that class if you got some time. It's ridiculous. The top like 15 picks in that draft. Like you see like the Christian Ponder, I think it was that year. Like you see that pick at like number 8 overall, and you're like, oh, man, that's like Minnesota, dude. Like you kind of blew it right there. But anyway. He turns into one of the best tackles of the last, 25, 30 years in the NFL, maybe even more than that. Going to probably be a Hall of Famer. And then Tyler Smith, they drafted him as a tackle. He's going to play tackle for us at some point, was the conversation then. But, hey, we're going to move him into guard. He was taking guard reps, taking tackle reps, was playing behind Connor McGovern for essentially all of training camp.
Imagine telling people that now. Like, yeah,
yes.
was behind Connor McGovern.
Right. Like old school offensive line coach meant that the veteran offensive lineman who was never going to be the starting, I mean, he turned out to be the starting guard because of the injury situation, but who the plan was never for him to be the starting guard, maybe he looked smart by the end of it because he got all that work, but Tyler Smith didn't get hardly any starting guard work in that first training camp, even though he was like destroying people in the second unit. And played well in the games and all that kind of stuff, just could never crack the starting lineup. And then Tyron Smith gets hurt, and Tyler Smith goes out to left tackle and was pretty good starting left tackle as a rookie. Like
definitely way better than we thought he was going to.
Right, like not what Tyron Smith was, right? But not a liability at left tackle as a rookie. And so this process for Tyler Guyton is going to be just that. It's going to be a process. He's going to get his butt kicked a few times. And Tank's going to pull him to the side and say, hey, when I do this is what you need to be looking for, because when guys are going to throw this move, this is the setup for it. And we're going to, all this kind of stuff. When my hands go here, don't try to go here because I'm going to Euro step the other way. Be ready, get to your spot, set up camp, and know that to get to the quarterback, I've got to go through you. Don't let me go around you, right? And so, they'll have all those conversations, and he will get a lot better throughout this camp because – this is the first time that these guys just play football, and even all the way through, the pre-draft process. Like they're doing more track and field and stuff like that than they are playing football. And Tyler got drafted and moved to Dallas and has been spending a bunch of time with Duke. So I think overall he is the guy, because him being a starter level, like NFL quality starting left tackle, the difference between that and being a really bad left tackle, or between like the delta between Tyler Guyton being a good average starting left tackle to what you get from Chuma Edoga as your starting left tackle is massive. Even though it feels like, Chuma Edoga is a little bit below average, even if we just go to average, just having that at left tackle is such a huge difference for a football team. And even at center, like if Cooper Beebe struggles or whatever, like Brock Hoffman's not a real NFL player, but I think because
don't tell Solari that.
Solari believes it. I mean, there's a lot of guys like Brandon Thorne's a Brock Hoffman fan. Like there's several of these guys that like do this stuff for real, that like are fans of Brock Hoffman. And I don't get it, but like, hey, like he does a podcast, some more of this access stuff that we're talking about, like how many players for other teams do podcasts, all this kind of stuff. But I don't think he's a real NFL starting center, but I think if you plug Brock Hoffman between Zach Martin and Tyler Smith, or you let TJ Bass do some snapping and he becomes there's enough options at center that I think you're going to be okay at center one way or another. Whether it's like a plus position or not, I think you're going to be okay. At left tackle, you could be really bad at left tackle for this season. And Dak Prescott's a good enough quarterback. Mike McCarthy's a good enough coach. Like, they will work around. We've seen them work around really bad offensive line play at one or two spots. But if Tyler Guyton is bad and stays bad, doesn't get better, that creates a real problem for this offense that they're going to have to spend the whole season working around. How do we solve this problem at left tackle for every game plan, instead of figuring out how are we going to attack the opposing defense?
Yeah, the problem if left tackle, if Tyler Guyton struggles and he's not, say he's a below average left tackle by NFL standards, I think the biggest problem is not only obviously the pass protection issues, but it's the other consequences down the line of how it affects guys like Jake Ferguson, because he's chipped before getting out in a route. And what does that do? That severely limits the types of routes that he can do. It limits the kind of downfield threat he can be, the kind of seam threat he can be. If they use the running backs in thing, then you're kind of taking away one of Dak Prescott's favorite security blankets to the flats, those type of things. So when you have to compensate for a poor offensive lineman, it's not only bad because, obviously the pass protection issues, getting quick pressures, those type of things, but it also affects so many other parts of the offense and kind of limits what you can do. And that's just, if you want to have the optimal offense in the NFL, it's just not something that you want to have to do on a play-by-play basis. If it's a matchup only thing you're going against, a Max Crosby, you're going against a TJ Watt, a Myles Garrett.
It's week one and you got Myles Garrett lined up out there. You're going to help over there, right? You're not going to, especially in pure passing situations, you're going to help over there. But to have to think about it for every down, you're absolutely right, for sure.
100%. So it's going to be, if he can turn out to just be average at left tackle as a rookie, that would be such a boon for the Dallas Cowboys offense, not only for this year, but also for the future moving forward. Because as you kind of intimated to, we all had our opinions on Tyler Guyton, the draft prospect, but everything he's done since getting drafted is exactly what you want from your first round pick. The work that he's putting in, the people that he's surrounding himself in. I am very optimistic about how his future career looks based upon those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I have a high degree of confidence that at some point Tyler Guyton will be an acceptable level or better player at left tackle for the Cowboys. The question is, in this massive year of transition, essentially a 1-year timeline for a lot of these guys, does that timeline match with Tyler Guyton's timeline of becoming an acceptable level NFL tackle? And so that's kind of the question, I think.
That's a great point that you make, because the fact that the coaching staff is essentially on 1-year deals, that doesn't only affect their future, it affects these players who were just drafted's future. If they bring in a new coaching staff, how often do we hear, well, he didn't draft him, that's not his draft pick, that's not his left tackle. So a lot of these players' careers is is like potentially kind of hanging in the balance depending on how this season goes and who the coaching staff is going to be next year. And if they bring back the same coaching staff or if they get a new one, there's a lot of players whose futures ride on this season being successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Or even like for an offensive lineman, even if he's a first round pick, and with the way the executive branch, as you said, of the Cowboys team holds a lot of weight in the football operations side too. Like Tyler's going to be the starting left tackle until he's not until it's proven he's not an acceptable level tackle. But if this coaching staff is gone, and now all of a sudden it's a whole new staff, new language for them to learn, new techniques probably coming from it. We've seen that, how many times have we seen these offensive line coaches change over the last, decade, it feels like. And, oh, well, they're doing this new technique and they're teaching, a two-hand punch or an outside hand first, or they're teaching, different vertical set. They're teaching all this stuff different. And now it's a big adjustment for these guys. And it's no longer, hey, we've got this veteran group of offensive linemen that can kind of adapt to whatever we teach them. It's now, all right, this offensive line is really young. Mm-hmm. And so if they're flipping and flopping techniques and, all this other kind of stuff, it gets really complicated for those guys if you make those changes.
We saw
early
in their career. Terrence Steele. Steele is example number one. Obviously, he's coming off the torn ACL, but I think the bigger deal that people aren't talking about is the change in offensive line technique. Duke Manyweather hinted at it repeatedly last season about how the outside hand dominant techniques that Solari and Chinyoung were implementing into the offensive tackles was creating issues for him. It wasn't something that he was comfortable with. It wasn't something that really played to his skill set, his strengths. And we saw how his level of play kind of fell off a little bit last year compared to the year before. So it makes a big deal, even though we don't think about it. We don't talk about it as much in a general Cowboys discourse landscape, but it matters so much.
Oh yeah. There's a handful of, there's probably 4 or 5 of us that think about, the outside hand going first, and the fact that if that outside hand goes first and gets swatted down, now this whole shoulder, this whole outside edge becomes really soft. We're thinking about that stuff. Now, why does Solari teach it that way? Because in theory, you're longer, right? In theory, if you're the right tackle, I'm using my right hand. It kind of looks like I'm the left tackle, but if you're protecting a guy coming off this edge and you reach with this arm, you're longer than if you were to two-hand punch or to one hand, to step with your inside hand first. Now, a lot of that goes back to, and I don't understand so much, and we talked about this with the draft stuff, like so much of playing offensive line to me in my head is just get your body where it's supposed to be. And if I get my body where it's supposed to be, I am going to be bigger than the guy who's trying to run through me or around me. And so if I get to my spot, then I make him have to either go around me on a path he doesn't want to take, or to get through to take the path he wants to take, he's got to come through me. And that's when my 50 pounds of weight and all this strength and stuff like that comes into play. And I think that's what Duke sort of leans to also. And that's what some of the other offensive line coaches that have been here before that have kind of played with more of that inside hand dominant, like body position style, instead of like Solari's like trying to widen the pocket out real wide by using that outside hand to push guys wide. But you made the transition. You're such a pro. You made the transition before I could even mention my next guy I was going to talk about, and that's Terrence Steele, right? Like, and this plays with the Tyler Guyton conversation too. Is it's like if you have one tackle who struggles in pass protection, you can work around that. You can slide the protection to the left. You can let Terrence Steele live on his own on the right and be okay. If you have 2 tackles that have problems in pass pro, now you're talking about double chips. Now you're taking 2 guys out of the route, or you're talking about some funky stuff inside, leaving a center on a 2-eye technique or something like that, so you can fly a tackle out. Like you're putting guys in really bad spots if you have 2 tackles that have problems in that.
Yeah, or you're taking the offense back to like it was the first 6 weeks last year, where it's all quick game.
All quick game. Yeah, exactly.
And we saw the kind of issues that creates and how that really limits what the Cowboys do best, and it limits their explosive weapons and their explosive playmaking ability.
Yeah, because they are not, if you rewind back to 2017, 2018 Sean McVay Rams, like they were like big, hard play action, like 8-man pass protection. Like everybody was in pass pro, but you have these big play action concepts with all this motion and all this stuff that would get guys open down the field. And Jared Goff would drop like 15 yards deep off these big play action drops and just throw freaking lasers over the middle of the field in play action. That's not the way the Cowboys live on offense. So if you have to dedicate all these guys to pass pro, now you're talking about 2 or 3 guys out en route on traditional drop back concepts, which is kind of the way Dak likes to play and has played really well over the last few years. Like you're really handicapping your offense at that standpoint if you want to be a true drop back team, which I think, historically Mike McCarthy has wanted to be. It's what they've been the last several years, has been mostly a true drop back team. If you want to be that, you got to get guys out in routes. And so we've seen this team put their tackles on islands a lot. And if they can't do that, it's going to create some potential issues for this team in a big way. From an offensive, how do we create explosive plays on offense, which is kind of the name of the game. And doing it through the passing game is the easiest and best way to do it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And like I said before, this is not something that you'll hear a lot of people talk about, because when you're talking about explosive playmaking, a lot of people just focus on the receivers, the quarterback, the play calling, like the plays being called, those type of things. But the offensive line plays such a huge part because they set the menu of the things that you can do, things that you are capable of executing on a play-by-play basis. And if your offensive line is diminished, it's going to severely limit that menu, and that's going to make things so much easier for opposing defenses, because they don't have to focus about, we got to worry about all these things. We only got to worry about this because we know their left and right tackles are crap. So if we focus on attacking those guys, we know they're going to play the short game. We can sit on these short routes, and that's when you see the issues get created. And that's why the offense was really stuck in neutral for the first quarter of last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is pretty crazy to think about the fact that, like you said, the offense was stuck in neutral for a quarter or a third of the season, and they still wound up being the best offense in football by the end of the season. Like, it just shows you what the guys on this offense are capable of when they're put in the right positions. And when you have a receiver like CeeDee Lamb, and when I think of CeeDee Lamb as a route runner, I don't think of him as like the precision, precise, which is kind of interesting in a West Coast offense that he had, 1,800 yards last year in a West Coast offense with that style. But I don't think of him as like, you're going to run this route to 12 yards every time. You're going to cut on your 7th step.
Adam Thielen kind of.
Yeah, he's not that. He's very much like a feel, create space, use footwork, all this kind of stuff. And if you don't have pass pro to give him time to do that stuff, to create that separation, you can have some issues. He, changes his tempos and things like that in his routes. And him and Dak are on the same page with a lot of that kind of stuff. They see the game the same way, I think, which helps. But if you can't pass pro to give him time to do that, now you're neutering your best player wide. You're neutering your quarterback. You're just like really taking the teeth out of your offense if you can't pass pro. So they will force guys into pass pro to protect, to give the quarterback time. And you do that, and now you're talking about playing 12 personnel instead of playing 11 personnel, so that Schoonmaker can be on the opposite side of Ferguson, so that they can both be there to chip. And now you're talking about 2 tight ends on the field that run 4-6 instead of an extra wide receiver that runs a 4-4. Like, you're just pulling speed and athleticism off the field when you have to do that kind of stuff. And in neutral down and distance situations, 1st and 10, 2nd and 6, stuff like that. Like, that's fine. You do some of that stuff to create ambiguity about what you're going to do on offense. But when it's 3rd and 8 and you have to put 2 tight ends on the field and a running back, you got Zeke Elliott on the field because he's the best pass pro running back you have, and you've got Schoonmaker and Ferguson on the field. You're in 12 personnel with 3 guys that probably run 4.7 or below at this point in their career on the field. Your only options to pick up that first down at that point, because Ferguson's got a chip, so his route selection, his menu becomes limited coming off the line of scrimmage. You really have 2 available options on the field for that. And if those guys have to be at the core of the formation to pass protect, then that means that CeeDee Lamb can't be near the core of the formation. He's got to be wide, or you got to be super condensed, which is fine. That's one of the core tenets of offense for me is you condense the formations. But it really limits a lot of things. You can't move guys around as much. You can't do a lot of the fun stuff you want to do if you're really limited to, hey, we got to keep all these guys in tight to help our pass protection.
Yeah, and like you were saying, I think CeeDee Lamb, there is not a human being made alive who can cover CeeDee Lamb one-on-one, especially when he has a two-way go from the slot. I really don't believe there is a man alive who can cover him in those situations consistently. And because in the way he does it, is like you said, it's not really the precise route running, it's his ability to beat and create separation against a man. And he's even gotten better against doing that against double teams and high-low coverage and stuff. He's doing a good job getting feel for space and against zone concepts, all those things that you improve on as you get more experience. But when he's one-on-one man coverage, especially from the slot, he's incredibly difficult to cover. And as long as you can give him the amount of time he needs to create that separation, big plays and positive things are going to happen for the offense consistently.
Yeah, and the other side of the coin of this whole conversation we're talking about with these offensive tackles is if a defensive coordinator knows they're going to block me up with 5 and I'm going to have a real hard time winning one-on-one against these 5, I've got to bring extra if I want to heat the quarterback. That guarantees more man coverage looks, less cover one, less cloud coverage, less rolled coverage to CeeDee Lamb. It guarantees more opportunities for those positive matchups that you want to see CeeDee Lamb get, or even those like relatively even matchups. Like he's going to win so many of those. But if you're a defensive coordinator, if I'm Jim Schwartz and I'm coordinating the defense for the Browns in week 1, and I say, okay, I know they got a rookie left tackle, they have a right tackle that struggled last year, and then if I get into the second quarter and these guys can't block, and it doesn't matter if it's Myles Garrett or whoever else, we're getting pressure, we're getting home with 4, and Dak's having a miserable day. Like, all right, I'll bring 4 all day and, go to old school, Bill Belichick. Just play one double because I'm not scared of anybody else, especially if you can't pass protect to give Brandon Cooks time to get down the field. I'm not scared of anybody else. I'll play one double, rush 4, and I'll make your life miserable all day and make things really difficult for an offense. And so if they don't get the pass pro figured out, if the tackles can't play at an acceptable level, it just, we spent 20 minutes now just rolling through the snowball of problems that creates. And we haven't even gotten into like all the concepts that it pulls off your board. Like you said, the menu of items that you can get to is limited so much if those 2 guys aren't ready. But the other side of the coin is if Terrence Steele is back to Terrence Steele 2022 before the injury, and Tyler Guyton is acceptable level NFL starting offensive tackle, from snap 1, may or may not happen, but relatively early. Now your menu gets real wide all of a sudden, especially if Cooper Beebe, the center, the bigger, more massy, stronger center, is what we think he provides what we think he can and should provide there in the front of the pocket and in the running game. Like now your menu's like you're not limited on the menu at all at that point because you have weapons outside, you have pass pro and run blocking inside. You really the only personnel you're limited by at that point is what you have at running back on offense. And I talked to Marcus about this yesterday. I think the podcast came out today. I think it's pretty safe to say the Cowboys have the worst running back room in the NFL right now.
Yeah, one of them for sure.
Yeah, if nothing else, it's the least exciting running back room. Right? We talked about how like you could pick a random name that got paid about the same amount as what Zeke got paid, and if it just was not Zeke for the same amount of money for the same investment, fans would be way more excited about the running back. It would be an opportunity for a different approach to running back, right? But this just feels like, we just went back to Zeke.
Going back off this is the interesting thing that I've talked, especially a lot offline with like Landon, about kind of the run scheme changes. And, everybody last year, a big thing that we heard, especially towards the latter half of last year, I think Brian brought us was a big reason because of this, as I think a lot of the Cowboys discourse is kind of pulled in which direction based on kind of the things that he says.
Yeah.
A lot of times. But the run scheme in general, in your opinion, what would the ideal run scheme look like from a concept perspective? Are you someone who thinks they should be heavy outside inside zone? Are you someone who thinks they should be an inside zone duo team? Should they be more to the edges, pin and pull, or should they be a mix of them all? What in your opinion, what is the ideal kind of running back or running scheme that the Cowboys should utilize this next season with the
So I think understanding what the Cowboys have on the interior of the offensive line, and I'm assuming Cooper Beebe steps in as the starting center and he provides I think there's a really significant chance that the first snap he takes as the first team center at training camp, it'll happen at some point, whether it's the first practice like it should be or not, like that first practice, they have at least the same level of center play that they had the last 2 years, which was this is no shot at Tyler Biadasz, acceptable level, pretty good. You got paid $8-10 million a year to go play center. That's good enough center play. But there are going to be some areas where he's a immediate upgrade. And I think one of those areas is going to be, the ability to move people in the running game. And so if you take that trio of Zach Martin, Cooper Beebe, and Tyler Smith on the inside, and you run a bunch of duo and a bunch of inside zone with those guys, I think you got a chance to really move some people and really get things going inside. And then we've also seen, assuming Terrence Steele is really healthy, we've seen that combination of Terrence Steele and Zach Martin be really good, insanely good run blocking on the right side of the field. If we get that on both sides, if we get Terrence Steele back to what he was, and you get that interior three, I think you can run a lot of duo, a lot of inside zone, and then you can pepper in the pin and pull stuff and things like that, and get these guys on the move to when you want to attack the edge. Get these guys on the move on the edge. Now we'll see with Terrence Steele and stuff like that. Can you get back to some of the outside zone stuff? I'm kind of a big menu run game guy. I treat if I was designing and building an offense, I'd be an outside zone, inside zone guy. I just think it minimizes the negative plays, which for me from the running game is the most important thing, all that kind of stuff. But for this team with the personnel that they have, and Zeke's a really good duo runner, Rico's
a really good.
Yeah, I was about to say Rico's a good duo runner. I think that really has to come back to what it is. You got to come back to duo, which they at some point in the year last year they started sprinkling more duo in. I don't remember what it was, but they had completely gone away from it.
I think it was after Blasco came back, correct?
So yeah, there was some of that coordinated at some point. Yeah, so they have become a really almost exclusive wide zone team, outside zone team. And they weren't running the ball very well and all that kind of stuff. And Blasco came back or whatever they did, they put some duo back in. They started pulling some guys every once in a while, and things really started to open up. And so teams now are very good at defending this true traditional zone run game. So you have to have some counters to that, whether it's duo, which for folks who listen who –
not to cut you off, but that's the whole reason why we've seen the proliferation of defenses using the 2-eye technique on a consistent basis is to make those combination blocks a lot more difficult.
If the center has a hard time, it's a lot harder for a center to reach a 2-eye on the front side than it is for him to reach a 1 technique, a shade on the front side. And so, and it's really hard for them to reach a 3 technique on the front side. So you hardly ever see those guys run that direction. They, make some checks, but. For folks who aren't super nerdy scheme guys like we are, duo is essentially power, which is, a bunch of guys blocking down with a puller, but without the puller. So instead of creating the down block and the pull to create the 4-man blocking surface on one side, what you do is you now create 2 double teams go in that direction. And so they call it duo because it's two double teams. So you're trying to create that vertical displacement and give the running back the opportunity. And it's funny because it's one of the few running plays that it can hit through the A gap right off the butt of the center, or it can hit all the way out through the D gap, depending on what the linebackers do. So it gives the running back the opportunity to read the action of the linebackers off of those 2 combo blocks on the inside. And then he can if the hole is inside, and a lot of times on duo, the hole will be tiny. It'll be a sliver. And if you can get through that sliver, it opens up big time. You'll see big, huge plays hit off of duo through little small slivers and then go. And sometimes you'll see the running back hit that sliver and get tackled for like a 3-yard gain. And this is when screenshot guy on Twitter comes around and will post a screenshot of like the C gap that's wide open, and they're like circling it with their phone. Like, why is he running here when this C gap is wide open? It's because that's the hole he's supposed to hit, because the C gap's about to close at the moment you put the screenshot. All that kind of stuff. But you'll see, I think with this interior line group and with the running backs that they have, I think duo is probably like their best bet to be their, like, this is our, there's a lot of the conversation about the identity. What's the identity of this team? Like, if you want to have an identity run play for this team, it's duo out of some, like, any and every formation and personnel group you can run it out of, basically. For me, at least. That's where I would start right now. And that is also, it also helps that that's kind of the meta around the league right now at this point, is to duo.
One thing I also like doing when you run a lot of outside zone is using counter as a constraint. You know, because those down blocks on the outside look very similar to, the combination blocks on the backside of an outside zone play. And that gives the linebackers a lot of issue. But, to me, even more than the general concepts, duo versus zone versus inside zone, is I want them to incorporate more, take the motion aspect of the offense further. We saw last year, the first 6 weeks of the season, as we've talked about many times, they were bottom third of the NFL and it flies in motion rate. But then after they came out of the bye, they were in the top third of the NFL. Yeah. I want to be top quarter. I want to be top fifth. I want them to just push that advantage just a little bit more.
Yeah.
Give the defenses more stimuli that they have to process on a snap by snap basis,
Yeah, absolutely.
I think even more than going inside, outside zone is marrying it with those jet sweep motions, those quick out motions, those type of things where the defense is they have to switch their responsibilities real quick. And while they're switching their responsibilities, boom, you hit them.
Yeah, or like you want to see a duo play hit like massive, run jet sweep with like Cavante, like somebody with speed, with legit speed, which the Cowboys have a couple of those guys now on offense, which it's been a while. Throw a jet motion behind the line of scrimmage and run duo, and with a young linebacker that like the eye candy just like grabs them and squirrel, and then all of a sudden you hit duo behind them because you get some displacement from those offensive linemen, and that's how you get the like 25-yard run, like straight up the middle where the running back never changes direction and gets tackled by the safety like 20 yards down the field. Exactly. like the I don't remember the concept, but the Zeke touchdown run against the Steelers, like his rookie year, like where he in overtime, he just like hits it up the middle and the clouds part, and it's like all he has to do is run straight to the end zone to win the game. Like that kind of play comes from that sort of eye candy for the second level players combined with displacement at the front by the offensive lineman. That's how you hit huge running plays. And so that's why the running back doesn't necessarily matter, because it doesn't matter who the running back is in that situation. Like if the offensive lineman's getting displacement and the scheme is creating the confusion and the problems at the second level for defenders, you're going to hit a 15-yard run just based on the design and the blocking if you get it blocked up right. It doesn't matter if it's – now the difference between it being Zeke and getting 15 or 16 and it being Christian McCaffrey and it being 40, now there's a difference there, but the actual difference – but there's not as much difference there. That's the 40-yard run happens so rarely that like it's not – there's not that much added benefit to that on a global team building perspective. But those things – and that's it. We saw that change happen mid-season. And like, think about, we talk about how busy these guys are and how the grind of the season is and all that kind of stuff. And Mike McCarthy talks a lot about like sitting down and doing a big scheme evaluation and putting together what they want to put in and all that kind of stuff in the offseason every year. I'm really interested to see, like, do they grab that motion lever, like you said, and just like jam it all the way to the max and just max out the motion because they saw what it changed for the offense last year and what they come up with from that standpoint. And then how quickly they steal what Mike McDaniel and Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan come up with in week one that then pops up and everybody's like, whoa, what is this? And then how quickly does it get incorporated here with what the Cowboys have? Because they took that exit motion pretty quick. Like you said, week 6, week 7, all of a sudden we see that quick exit. I think Shanahan calls it cheat motion. We saw that cheat motion fly out there, and they were doing it with everybody. They were doing it with wide receivers, tight end, like everybody was doing it. And so how quick do they incorporate that stuff, and how much do they just slide? Do they max it going into the season? Will be interesting to see for me from a scheme perspective. That all that stuff, all that window dressing creates the opportunity for the really successful running game. It creates the opportunity to protect guys in the passing game, to protect some of your pass blockers in the passing game, and get guys open in the run game or in the downfield in the secondary too. So
could not say it better myself, my friend.
there you go, man. That was a fun, like kind of nerdy football conversation about what we're looking for from training camp. And really a lot of it boils down. We talked about this offensive line all off season, how they had to draft offensive linemen. They did. And now it comes down to, can those offensive linemen that they drafted, and then the veteran who kind of had a down year last year, and those guys step into where they need to be. And if they have a good training camp, this Cowboys offense looks like it's going to be in really good shape.
And before we leave, the one thing that we don't discuss with the offensive line, because we often talk about the issues with them, the Cowboys have the best guard tandem by far.
Absolutely.
Not even close. Zach Martin and Tyler Smith are both top 5 guards in the NFL, regardless of team. So when you have those kind of tent poles, it makes things easier to kind of insert the other situations, because to their left, no matter what other person you're playing, they're playing next to someone who's one of the best at what they do. You know, Guyton's next to Tyler Smith. BB is next to Smith and Martin. Steele's next to Martin. So they all have someone they can lean on who can kind of make things easier or kind of, you know, give them help, all these type of situations. So that does help an extremely amount. And as you talked about with Zach Martin potentially leaving next year, that's not something that the Cowboys are going to have, you know, perpetually in the future.
Yep, absolutely. And even more than they're going to be there to help, they're not going to be somebody that tackle has to worry about helping. Like Tyler Guyton will never have to say, okay, I need to make sure I don't get too wide because I don't want to leave a window here for this guy to beat Tyler Smith one-on-one. Like, all right, Tyler, you got it. I'm gonna play on I'm gonna come out here and try to take care of my guy. And so that's a huge thing for a young offensive lineman, which Cooper Beebe's going to have it, like you said. Tyler Guyton's going to have it. Is all I have to worry about is my assignment. Who am I blocking? Make sure I block my guy up, and everything else will take care of itself, because these two guards are so, like, it's probably underrated. Which there's a lot of talk about the Cowboys guards, and they probably still are not talked about enough for how good that they are.
100%.
Awesome. Guys, we are, like I said, less than 10 days from the first training camp practice. You know, John, I think you'll be there, 2 weeks from now or something like that? Like the first week of August, you'll be there?
August 2nd through the 5th.
There you go. So we will get probably a show or two of live John owning from Oxnard, you know, talking about camp, what he's seeing. The insight that you guys will get from this spot right here with John at camp is better than any insight you will get from anybody else anywhere at camp. You will hear Brian Broaddus. We love Brian. Brian is awesome. Like, he has taken Cowboys coverage to a level that it never was before. The access has been incredible, all that kind of stuff. Tons of respect for Brian. But if you have, the level of detail that John watches practice with, and I know this because I talked to John about practices outside of what he's posting on Twitter in public and all that kind of stuff. The level of detail that John watches practice with is unmatched. Like, there's not anybody out there that watches practice the way John does. And so you will get a level of detail and analysis from this spot right here, from that guy right there in that chair. He'll be in a different chair then because he'll be in Oxnard. But you will get a level of detail and a level of analysis that you can't find anywhere else. So make sure you're tuning in here to the Blue Star Lunch Hour during camp while he's there, and then after he's back, we'll be getting into preseason games and stuff like that not too long after that. So it's exciting times, guys. Football is right around the corner. I think the Bears kick off camp like this week, like the next couple of days. So pretty awesome. Hey, guys, it's basically the 2024 NFL football season. We made it. The college football game came out yesterday. I don't have it yet because I'm busy, but it's an exciting time for football fans all over. This is the Blue Star Lunch Hour. It is sponsored by Silver Moon Financial. That's my bookkeeping company. If you suck at accounting, there's a link and an email address down below. You can reach out to me, and we can help you. Not so that your business doesn't have sucky accounting, because you can't have that. So, all right, guys, It is past 1 o'clock Central. We're going to get out of here. Thanks for joining us for lunch. We will see you later.